today's program is called the English Novel, and under this series of lectures we have covered a number of authors from English literature, and we have come now to the 19th century generally speaking. And for today's lecture we have Professor Payal Nagpal, who teaches English in Janaki Devi Mahavidyalaya, and she will be Delhi University, and she will be talking about George Eliot's famous novel Middlemarch. Let me right in the beginning tell you about the fame of this novel. This is a big novel, must be 800 pages or so, and it has multiple plots, and all those plots have an independent existence as well as they are integrated into the larger scheme of the novel. Let me also tell you, friends, those who are not exactly conversant with English literature but are going to do it now under a plan, that George Eliot is not a man, it's a woman. And in the 19th century she was compelled to adopt a male name so that she would be taken seriously. But later on the name became famous, and she is still George Eliot. Her name is Mary Ann Evans. And the other thing that I would say, and Professor Payal Nagpal will be elaborating on this, is that it's a very important feminist writer in the 19th century. One person, who tries to interpret things very radically, considering that she was writing in the 19th century, and she had to fight a lot of prejudices. And this novel takes care of all these issues and problems. Without further ado, let me now request Professor Payal Nagpal to please start her lecture.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. As Professor Prakash mentioned that this was indeed a very, very famous novel, and it's important to mark that George Eliot's real name was Mary Ann Evans, and in the 19th century a lot of writers, actually women writers that is, had to opt for the male pseudonym. It's also very interesting how at that point of time fiction in a sense was considered to be, in that sense, it was just a few decades old. The whole idea of novel writing that emerged only towards the middle of the 18th century. The only one before that being Aphra Behn's Oroonoko. So at that point of time, this whole possibility of women writers experimenting with this genre became a possibility. But writing was one thing and publishing was a totally different thing. So for them to actually publish and to be accepted in the public domain in terms of being read was a leap of a totally different sort, and which is why opting for a male pseudonym in that sense became a kind of more convenient thing to do. So if we look at a few details from George Eliot's life, born in 1810, and she lived pretty much through the 19th century and died only in 1880. So she was the daughter of a local mill owner, and why I'm pointing this out is that it's again important to mark how her understanding of the wide range of people, of characters that were there in the corpus of the middle class is something that she has captured beautifully in the novel. Quite early in her life, she met people like Harriet Martineau, Robert Owen, Emerson, and so on, and this kind of brought her into touch with a new kind of thinking that was relevant to the times, and new ideas that were emerging, and she took to these new ideas, and which is why her novel also questions, it interrogates established ideas. So be it the whole idea of medicine, or be it the idea of society, the economic structure, religion, she interrogates all these. So very early, in fact, she began questioning religion and the biblical tradition. her own English translation of Strauss's work was there, after which she became the assistant editor of the Westminster Review, and which is of course famous for radical ideas. She also in her personal life was very, very way ahead of her times and very radical, as she lived in with George Henry Lewes. And later on, this engagement with the whole construct of questioning religion continued as she translated Feuerbach and Spinoza. So her novels, are well known: Scenes of Clerical Life, Adam Bede. We have Romola and Mill on the Floss, and of course Middlemarch. Towards the end of her life, she married John Cross and died soon after. So when we begin, an analysis, a discussion, a looking at of Middlemarch, I think it hinges on two very important terms. One is history and the other is reform. If we look at the sense of history that Middlemarch provides, if we want to really understand what was happening in the 19th century, I think we need to pick up these novels and read them. It's a novel that's published somewhere in 1871, 1872, but she's actually George Eliot is in Middlemarch is talking about the events that take place broadly around 1830 to 1832, the period of the Reform Bill. And which is why the sense of history, the sense of looking at a society that is fast changing is there in this novel. So this sense of history operates at various levels. There is change that is taking place in the society, in its configuration, the change in the economic structure, the very configuration of it's also Middlemarch's about provincial life. So the very boundary of what it really means to be in a province, and again religion. So looking at the change, mapping the changes that are taking place in the field of religion, and of course the very famous Reform Bill of 1832. So I would also request Professor Prakash here, who's also kind of worked in detail on George Eliot's Mill on the Floss, to tell us what he thinks about George Eliot's engagement with history and reform.
No, I agree with you. She has a very strong sense of history. And her novels are rooted in the early 19th century, and like the Mill on the Floss, it is a mill along a river. The energy of the water that is being used to run the mill, and as you said that she was the daughter of a miller, so that would have helped her visualize the role of production in the 19th century, which she was a witness to and which she made her subject. So this is very important. And secondly, the sense of history is something that is generally missing in most of the contemporary writing, and in the 19th century also. So one should look at things, in specific contexts, like the Reform Bill you're talking about, that would shape the, lives of a large number of people. And it also shows that politically England is very active, and there's a kind of discussion going on regarding the efficacy, regarding the relevance of this bill. So she takes into cognizance all these things in order to write fiction. So just see that history and fiction, they are merged so well that one doesn't know whether one is reading a novel or one is reading a piece of history. So that is where her novels appeal quite a lot.
Yes. That's true, and in fact I'm reminded of the famous French writer Balzac, who writes in the early 19th century and gives us a sense of history, the whole idea of social history that Balzac presents in his novels. I think it is something that's that it's a very similar kind of engagement that we see in the context of England in George Eliot's novels.
And they were contemporary novelists. He was active in France and she was active in England. And I think they would have read each other also. Mill on the Floss is an early fiction, so Balzac was active in the first half of the 19th century. So she definitely would have read Balzac, and he was very fond of the word history, and she was using history as an important tool to depict the social reality. So there are a large number of comparables between the two.
Yes. And which is I thought that, if we look at, I mean, France is famous for the realist novel, but again, in the context of England, I think this is really kind of given shape and form in the hands of George Eliot. The novel, as I mentioned, that, published in 1871-72, but it revolves around the events of 1832. So we need to ask why. What is happening? I think we need to understand that where at one level the novel is, it takes in the history of the particular period, but at the same time it also creates a kind of dialogue, a dialogue between the 1830s and the 1870s. And it's very interesting that a lot of the things that George Eliot makes a part of Middlemarch are ideas that continue to be relevant today. So, we really speaking need to ask ourselves as to why this relevance is there, and what is the kind of dialogue that George Eliot is creating between the two different time periods that she's using. So I will just present to you a quotation from an essay by George Eliot called Silly Novels by Lady Novelists, written in 1856, and in it she writes, the heroine is usually an heiress, probably a peeress in her own right, with perhaps a vicious baronet, an amiable duke, and an irresistible younger son of a marquis as lovers in the foreground, a clergyman and a poet sighing for her in the middle distance, and a crowd of undefined adorers dimly indicated beyond. So she was very critical of this kind of a projection of the heroine. And she felt that to present the heroine as an heiress, as a peeress, with a vicious baronet and amiable duke, it seems to indicate a kind of conventional plot. And this is something that George Eliot, totally opposed. Which means, before we actually kind of start looking at the different plots that she creates in the novel and the different characters that emerge, it's important to understand that George Eliot was trying to do something different. What it really speaking means is that she was experimenting with and trying to see how is it that a woman can actually break the mold that the society has kind of laid down for her. And she does that beautifully in Middlemarch. Because in terms of her role as writer, she's totally rejecting the conventional tropes that were prevalent at the time, and in creating these characters, in creating Dorothea, we see a certain kind of evolution in Dorothea's character. So, in creating women who perform, who at times toe the line, but she's quick to point out as to how this is very, very problematic and is not something that is going to kind of work out in the days to come. So these are the kind of ideas that she's experimenting with, and is doing so in a very, very genial sort of manner. And her narrative technique, in a sense, is it's subtle. She's saying a lot through the women characters that she creates. In fact, all characters that she creates, and which also reflects on, as I mentioned, her role as a writer, a novelist, who is critical of the world that she sees around her, and she uses the form of fiction to actually present that world.
You say something about Dorothea, the heroine here, or one of the heroines.
Yes.
Just let us know.
Yes. In fact, I was just kind of, next
Yes.
going to move to Dorothea's character, because with Dorothea, we see a certain kind of evolution that is there. Somebody who's extremely young, who thinks that she has, within the moral construct, a certain role that she has to perform. And she wants to kind of, live up to that role by doing something lofty. And that loftiness is related to morality, is related to religion. And how that totally falls flat for her, and it's something that just doesn't work out. I think that's the context in which we really need to see Dorothea's character. What would you say?
No, I'm fascinated by this character. She's an idealist. She has a kind of a vision, and she wants to become a saint on the lines of an established saint, and later on she becomes an ordinary person. So the change, from that kind of loftiness, the word is yours, coming down to the reality, and then understanding life. So in a way, she is telling people that heroines are not born; that they are made by circumstance. And sometimes, one is more heroic when one behaves unheroically. Towards the end, she is not a heroine at all.
Yes.
But then she has learned so much of wisdom that wisdom becomes the trait of the hero in her case.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And also, if we look at it in this, the point that you're making about the heroine not doing something grand but behaving in the most ordinary manner, I think that is to just be human in a sense. I think that is what she's really driving at. So, if we just look at, to continue from what George Eliot said, that, she's very, very critical. Her eyes and her wit are both dazzling. Her nose and her morals are alike free from any tendency to irregularity. She has a superb contralto and a superb intellect. She's perfectly well dressed and perfectly religious. She dances like herself and reads the Bible in the original tongues. So this is the kind of woman that George Eliot is totally, shelving, and she's saying that this is not what the female protagonist is really supposed to be doing. Or she says that what happens is that the heroine is not an heiress, that rank and wealth are, then there's the other extreme in which she's deficient, but she gets into high society and has a triumph of refusing many matches and securing the best, and she wears some family jewels or other as a sort of crown of righteousness at the end. So George Eliot is extremely, this is from silly novels, and so she's critical of this kind of a female protagonist. Having said that, we need to now ask, so if she's shelving this particular construct in which the female protagonist is placed, so what is George Eliot's own idea of the female protagonist? And here I think we get our cue from as Professor Prakash rightly said, of Dorothea's character. And if we look at the Dorothea Casaubon relationship, so again here, I'd like to just kind of bring a quotation from the novel to you. She had married the man of her choice, and with the advantage over most girls that she had contemplated her marriage chiefly as the beginning of new duties. From the very first, she had thought of Mr. Casaubon as having a mind so much above her own. So there is this desire to be Saint Teresa. There is this desire to be, because Casaubon is the person from the church. So she thinks that he has some grand project, and she is going to be a part of that project and whatever work, and she would be happy in her life. There is a huge age difference between Dorothea and Casaubon. So it also means that she is entering into a phase where she is giving up her material desires, in a sense, for this whole construct of morality, and that is where her idealism is pitched. That is where George Eliot pitches her idealism, in a sense. But soon enough, what is it that she realizes? That the duties of her married life, contemplated as so great beforehand, seem to be shrinking with the furniture and the white vapor walled landscape. So it's a complete it's a complete fall, where she realizes that what she had set out to do and what she had thought Casaubon to be, on both counts she is hugely disappointed, and marriage in fact spells only disappointment to Dorothea. What would you like to say here?
I would say that it's very courageous of the writer to make her heroine of a kind that fails in life, fails in her mission. So it's a depiction of failure of Dorothea. And that failure has given her wisdom, and she thought the man she was marrying was the best, but he appeared to be a wooden person later, and she realized it, and she had the courage then to come out of the whole thing. So of course, lucky for her that he died, and then she came into her own. But then she also learned the lesson of life in such a manner that she would not repeat a mistake. And Dorothea, outside this marriage, and then still becoming active in society, that is what women should do in the 19th century, and this is what she does.
In fact, would you agree, and this is what just struck me, that when we look at Dorothea, I think we're looking at in George Eliot's hands, the novel is a genre where the women are the actors. They are the ones who are, doing things, and they are the active agencies. And this is something that somehow I feel diminishes in the 20th century novel.
Absolutely. I agree with you, because there is another character, Lydgate, who needs money at some point of time, and she has the money, and she becomes, a kind of deity for him.
Yes.
She says, okay, take the money and do what you want to do.
Right.
Whereas his own wife is not able to give that kind of support.
Yes.
So this kind of an open woman, who is all for goodness, all for compassion, all for idealism, and when she can't do idealism in her own case, then anybody who is doing it, she would be giving support to him. So this as you say, is the reason why women are so dynamic, so very understanding, and the more humble they are, the more strong they become.
And the realization that the money that she has, the wealth that she has, weighs heavily on her. She's always uncomfortable with it and wants to actually kind of part from it and give it away in a sense to, as you said, to do something good. So this realization that the duties of her married life, contemplated as great beforehand, seem to be shrinking, I think is the point where we realize that the female protagonist here is going to make mistakes, is going to learn, and in this sense, in George Eliot's hands, the characterization is done in such a way that the character evolves and does not remain static in any way.
So friends, so far we have discussed the most important character of Middlemarch, and that is Dorothea, and she becomes a symbol of criticism and the frailties that she sees in the institution of marriage. And from then on, we'll be then talking about other characters, other issues that are raised in the novel, and how they are resolved partly or fully in the novel.